Okay. Hello and welcome to today's discussion about Black women in the music industry. My name is Roger Wilson. I'm co-founder of Black Lives in Music, a new organization focusing on issues of racial diversity in today's music industry. This is one of a number of fascinating sessions involving Black Lives in Music, sponsored by Tunecore, powered by Sound City and Guest House. The road to success in any industry involves talent, commitment, hard work, and luck. The road to success in the music industry is at least as tough, but minus the most obvious pathways. Add to that the ongoing issues for people of color, and the journey becomes more one of an odyssey, with violent twists and turns of fortune along the way. It's worse still if you are a Black woman. Earlier this year, Black Lives in Music commissioned a survey on the lived experience of Black music creators and industry professionals. The survey engaged with nearly 2,000 respondents. The subsequent report, now published, has produced key information and an insight into the experience of Black women in today's music industry. I talked to today's guests to discuss the findings of the report and to talk about what can be done to bring about change. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by radio broadcaster and singer, Loretta Andrews. Loretta is founder of Safe Music Management, has over 20 years of experience in the industry as a session singer, signed artist, radio broadcaster, and event host. Alongside Bianca Rose, she co-founded I Am Independent, an initiative with resources, supports, and encourages independent artists. Michelle Escoffrey is an award-winning British singer, songwriter, and vocal producer. She's an Ivor Novello and Brit Award winner and has penned songs for Tina Turner, All Saints, Beverly Knight, and Artful Dodger. Michelle has also performed with Stevie Wonder, George Michael, and a whole host of the world's leading pop artists. She's also president of the PRS Members Council and sits on the board of trustees for the PRS Foundation. Estee Blue is an R&B, jazz, and Afrofusion influenced artist. She also serves as Sound Connections Wired for Music trustee, associate, and senior producer. She also sits on the recently launched F-List board of directors led by former BASCA CEO Vic Bain. Estee has also recently completed her third degree in music business management from the University of Westminster under the Richard Antwi Scholarship. Nigerian-born Kima Otung is a Wales-raised singer-songwriter, making an impact on the contemporary R&B scene. Kima's genre-blending style, emotive lyricism, and smooth vocal delivery have helped establish her as a rising star in the UK scene. She's a Warner artist. Velvety vocals and deeply rich tones are the Kima Otung signature, generating truly anthemic singles that have landed her placements on both TV and radio. Last but definitely not least is Chelsea Carmichael, a saxophonist, arranger, and composer. She's part of the Mercury Prize nominated Seed Ensemble and is best known for her touring with Theon Cross, Joe Armand Jones, Outlook Orchestra, and New Graphic Ensemble. She also has her own projects, including her quartet under her own name, performing her own original compositions. To all of our guests, I wish you a warm welcome. Michelle, I'd like to start with you. I guess old habits die hard. There are clearly issues here with the archaic traditions and perceptions of a patriarchal society, which continues to have a devastating impact on Black women in this industry. One anecdotal report from the Blim report that I'd like to share with you as follows. Because Black women like myself, who are more than competent in the roles that they undertake, are often overlooked and not taken seriously, our skin color isn't as palatable within the office, within the board meeting room, on the stage, online platforms, and or in society. And unfortunately, it's been an ongoing issue for decades. Michelle, these are really quite damning words. I just wonder what your thoughts were on that.
Well, my thoughts on it are, it's true. It's difficult to progress in a lot of organizations and a lot of companies within the music industry if you're a woman of color. And it is a conversation that has been bubbling for quite some time now. And I think that we are at a stage where it can't just be conversation anymore. We are looking for action, and we're looking for um, the right support, the right acknowledgement, and the right representation. I think that it can be very difficult when you're the only person of color in the room, particularly as a woman. I remember my first day at the PRS board, and I came in, and said, "Oh, hi, my name's Michelle," and they were like, "Yeah, we know who you are," and it's like, "Oh yeah, I'm the only one."
I get
So
that.
yeah, so it can be very challenging, but I think the events of the last year and change have created conversations, and not just conversations, but the pushing for things to actually change.
Yeah, I hear that. I think there's been a lot that's taken place in this last year that's really galvanized some discussion, and
Yeah.
obviously that's why we're here. Estee, if I move to you, given the work you've done in the area of talent development, I was keen to come to you next. I wanted to go back to the beginning of, for me, where this problem starts, which is grassroots and talent development, an area that I know that you're experienced in. My own personal experience suggests that without the sorts of initiatives that inspirational people like yourself are involved in, young Black women are not getting enough of the opportunities to progress along the pathway to joining the industry. It feels to me that the issues start there. I guess I'm coming from the angle of young Black women with talent being denied opportunities from an early age. Do you agree that's a significant part of the problem, and that's probably where the starting point is?
Absolutely, because I also think back to my own experiences when I first started my journey, and there was support, to kind of get to that emerging stage. But beyond that, we all know that you're going to need a manager. You're going to need someone to progress your kind of business, as well as fund your development. And that's where it seems to stop for a lot of Black women, because when you go to like the open mic nights and things like that, you'll see them in droves. But when it comes to those who are then being able to make that next step and transition from, oh, I love singing and I love music, to this is my career and I want to make money from it and I want to kind of be a part of that economic ecosystem, that's where you get the blockages. And I know from my own experiences and the younger artists that I've developed, there's also colorism that plays into that as well. So amongst the crop of Black women who do want to pursue a career in music, it is the lighter skin mixed race artists who are chosen to then progress that. And then there's an even smaller crop amongst that who get to establish themselves. And, we don't need to name any names, but we can have a look at the various award shows, the top 40 charts at the moment. We can see that evidenced quite clearly.
Sure. I hear all of that, and certainly colorism is something that I'd like to come back to a little bit later on down the line. It's really interesting what you have to say there, and I just staying on that sort of grassroots involvement. Chelsea, if I could bring you in there, it'd be interested to know what your thoughts are in terms of that. For me, education is something that is supposed to be for everyone. Going back to the old days from when I was learning, actually that's what it was, and there's no way I would have been involved in the music business without that opportunity to learn an instrument for free. But obviously those initiatives have gone. Full stop. They don't seem like they're coming back soon, but obviously there's a knock-on effect in terms of how we move forward in the industry and what it looks like. I just wonder if you had any thoughts there about, the sort of grassroots initiatives that are or should be focusing on young Black girls and young women.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because there's kind of like a variety of factors within that for me. Kind of coming from up north in Manchester, I mean, like, it was amazing when I moved to London. I was just like, wow, there's organizations like Tomorrow's Warriors that are around, like, really helping out young Black musicians, and also, like, especially young Black women and femme musicians as well. And that was that was such an eye-opener for me, because coming where I was from, there was absolutely none of that. Like, even, I mean, where I grew up, I was kind of on the periphery of Manchester, but there was still nothing that looked remotely like Tomorrow's Warriors up there. So I definitely think kind of regionally, it's really difficult for like women of colour who aren't from London as well. It's so difficult for women of young women of colour to access spaces in which like they will be nurtured and be able to receive the right support. Like within London itself, like I said, there's Tomorrow's Warriors doing that great work, but also like through teaching. I mean, I used to do some peri teaching in high schools, and like schools were offering as much as they could in terms of giving students instruments where they can, but a lot of the time, like, they just did not have, the music departments just did not have the funding to be able to give students instruments and give them practice time, because they just don't have enough facilities within the music departments. Like, I was teaching like a student, I was teaching 5 saxophone students who were all sharing the same saxophone, and it's just like, how are they ever going to progress not having an instrument of their own? And then also they were kind of facing barriers as well in terms of like not being able to kind of play in the house, those sorts of things, like, you know, more academic subjects being prioritized over music. I mean, that in general is within this society, in this country, it's like music is just being pushed further and further back in the pecking order of like respectable careers that you can or can't do. So yeah, like, I mean, that's a huge thing. And so, like, I mean, music services do incredible work, but they're also receiving less funding as well. So schools are receiving less, music services are receiving less. The further you get out of London, the less there is.
Sure. And
yeah, so it's just kind of like, it's all culminating in only very specific sections of people are allowed to pick up an instrument in an accessible way now.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And of course, you know, what you're also alluding to there is there's an intersection with socioeconomic circumstances, as well as geographical, as well as ethnicity, as well as gender. So, you know, that's really interesting. Loretta, if I could just bring you in as well, just given your wide experience, I wondered how much this issue is steeped in historical racial stereotyping and the ensuing messaging of discrimination that accompanies such notions. Effectively, you know, I'm saying this is structurally hard baked in from grassroots upwards. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just thinking as I was listening to everybody, and we probably can all identify this, even if we've not explicitly said it, but the fact that as Black people, let alone as Black women, we're only allowed to be one-dimensional. So there's a type of Black person that's accepted, and then there's a type of Black woman. And, you know, the fact that there's all different kinds of personalities into all different kinds of foods and genres of music and all of those things, but there's always only ever been room for one. And when it comes down to women, they're at the bottom of the pile of that. And it is down to what is palatable and what is closest to anything that's Eurocentric, basically. I was in a conversation recently with a radio plugger who we were talking about race, and they were talking about the fact when they go into a meeting, if they have just pitched particularly a dark-skinned Black female artist, they know they can't pitch another one on the same day because there's only room for one. And when it comes to white artists, they can do all these different genres, they have all these different options. And then the added thing of, if you're a Black artist who wants to do folk music, well, no, because, you know, you obviously need to be the R&B or the soul or rap, you know, but stick to your vein. So I think that historical image of what it even means to be a Black person and what it means to be a Black woman, and that always seems to, without taking the analogy too far, but wants to be managed. So anything that seems perhaps threatening or too strong or too different is pushed out. I think that definitely comes from historical racism, and that's passed down through, and maybe not even consciously anymore, but certainly needs to change, but will take a long time to change.
Thanks, Loretta. And I hear that. I think it's that kind of unconscious involvement in the participation by the wider community of this that is really scary for me, because obviously people can be part of this and not even know that they're actually part of the issues that are holding people back. Kimmer, what support do you feel should be in place for Black women music creators to progress in the industry, but also to be able to expect to receive equal conditions of working? I'm just picking up a little bit on what Chelsea has had to say about being London centric in terms of where areas of support are, and then you as a young Black woman growing up in Wales. So I wonder if you could comment on that.
Yeah, I think I would mirror Loretta's sentiments about there only being space for one and being expected or required to fulfill kind of a certain stereotype. So for me, I think there needs to be a lot more transparency. I think maybe it's a luxury, having the luxury of having trained as a lawyer, being able to compare it to that field, which also needs a lot of work when it comes to progression and, you know, equal treatment across ethnicities. But at least there is some transparency in how decisions are made, how people are paid, so you can make quick, easy comparisons. And I think that's where something like Black Lives in Music is doing incredible work in bringing these things to light. Because my experience has been that there's only room for one Black person on the roster. So it will seem that you will see a roster, whether that be in kind of sync music licensing, or with, you know, the record label side of things, or with publishing. You can see a roster of various indie artists, all within that same genre, oftentimes being white, and then the one Black R&B artist that they say for any kind of R&B work that they have. And if that's already filled, then there's no space for you at all. And then there's the kind of the difficulty that I've come across as well with while I'm an R&B artist, a lot of my music kind of borders on pop music. And I have, you know, heard anecdotally a lot of people in the industry query whether a Black woman can be successful doing music that's pop. And there seems to be a lot more support when you do the kind of obvious genres of music. So for example, grime, maybe because an organization that supports a grime artist, it will be obvious that it's probably a Black artist, and therefore they get those kind of diversity points. But if it's a Black artist doing a non-stereotypically Black genre of music, there's a lot less support. So I think transparency and requiring transparency of the decision makers and how they make these decisions, how spaces and opportunities are allocated, will really help kind of bring the problem to surface and also blaze the way for putting in solutions as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, you know, that transparency is so important. Michelle, can I put the same question to you? Because, of course, the experience may be the same, but the pathway for industry executives is different. I've been in some of these spaces myself and found them alienating enough as a Black male. How can we get more Black women in these spaces, not as accepted, but belonging? I guess role modeling must play a part in this to some extent.
Definitely. I think just going back to what Kimmer was saying, it's quite saddening as well, because these are the same conversations that were happening in the 90s, in the 2000s, and we're still here. I'm listening and I'm going, but we're still having these conversations. Really? One in, one out. I'm like, wow. My experience as a songwriter, you know, writing songs that were outside of the genre of, you know, R&B or gospel music was, but that's not what you do. You know, you're not supposed to do that. And I was thinking about this morning in terms of the journey. And for me, I deliberately did not put my name on things so that the music could be heard first, and then say, oh, who wrote that? Oh, it was Michelle Escoffrey. And it's like, oh, okay. And it's finding these ways of kind of pushing your foot through the door when you're not even supposed to be in that room.
Sure.
And in terms of being in the executive space, I was very fortunate because another black woman put me forward. And I think that that's something that, you know, we have to do for each other. We have to shout about the women, you know, in our sphere, in our circle that we know, and sometimes that we don't know, but we know that they're doing good work. So we know that when somebody's saying, oh, we're looking for someone, oh yeah, I know somebody, or I know someone that knows somebody. I definitely think that we need to do more and more and more of that, and not feel threatened or feel like there's a lot of times where you hear, you know, somebody doesn't want another black person in the room because they feel like it threatens their position. But actually, when there's more of us in the room, there's more diversity of thinking, and we're stronger together. So I would say, in terms of being a role model, I've had role models that have pushed me and pushed me forward when even I was thinking, no, I don't want to go for that, or I don't think I belong in that space. And they've pushed and said, no, you do. And I think we need to do a lot more of that.
Yeah, I agree. And I just wonder very quickly, Loretta, if I could just bring you in on that, because that last sort of sentiment that you brought up kind of certainly has resonated with me for many years, that feeling that there's a competition that's going on rather than a collaborative approach, some kind of collegiate approach for Black women and for people of color in the industry, full stop. I just wonder what your experiences were of that, in terms of, do you feel that that's going more towards the direction that Michelle is actually describing, where people are actually doing what we need to do, which is put our brothers and sisters forward into these spaces, so that we can be showing people the way forward, blazing the path that Michelle has already shown.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, on that note about the competition, I actually think that's a myth, because I have only ever had other women and Black women support me. Brilliant. And I almost think that's a tool of the system to let people think that especially women are against each other, and you know, the kind of bitchiness going on and that kind of thing, and that you have to be a certain type of women to be an achiever and to excel in your field. But for my personal experience, and that's from being a singer, a radio presenter, and now through to being an artist manager, I've been surrounded by amazing women who have held the door open for me. And because of that, I make it my business to do that for other women. And also I wanted to make the point, I really think men have a role to play in this, Black men in particular. A lot of the opportunities have been given to me from Black men as well. Out of my 5 artists that I manage, 3 of them are Black, 2 are white, and 2 of them are Black men. And the fact that they were in a position where they had an array of managers to choose from, but they wanted me to choose to manage them. And there's been many opportunities when we will turn up for events and things, and they assume I'm the girlfriend or something, or probably the mum, actually, I'm that old. And they will always push me forward and say, no, this is my manager, or they'll try and not speak to me and speak to them, and they will make sure they push me forward. So I think men have more of a role to play, who are switched on to what's going on.
Yes.
And there's something really powerful about that, because I kind of expect my sisters to have my back, because they have and I've got theirs. That's a code. But it's really surprising and really empowering when a man does that for you and steps back so that you can step forward. But I definitely think that there is a culture amongst women of wanting to see each other succeed, wanting to help in that. And it feels safe. I was one of the first intake for the YouTube and Arts Council and MMF Accelerator managers. And out of the 19, there were 2 of us who weren't white, because that's the percentage of Black female managers. But in the next intake, they specifically asked people to find Black female managers, and they just announced the 4th year, and each year that's pretty much doubled. I think that's an amazing thing to see, and a sign that things are changing.
That's really encouraging. Thank you, Loretta. Estee, if I can turn to you, I guess the industry has done little to move beyond the Black Square protests of last year, or have you seen any seeds sown yet that suggest acknowledgement and accountability? There's some nice narrative there from Loretta, but I wondered what your experience has been. And I just wondered, if organizations like Black Music Coalition have begun to put elements of the industry into a compromising place.
I think, really last year was a big moment. I think everybody was made to feel uncomfortable, and rightly so, because of the events that took place. And I really saw for the first time in my career, people acknowledging that there is a race issue, and it goes much deeper than just focusing on race, that there's intersectional inequality as well. And I wrote an interesting piece for PRS actually about Black Lives Matter a year on, what happened post the Black Square. And unfortunately, for a lot of Black women who operate independently as I do, nothing much has changed, and a lot of the grassroots initiatives, from what I've seen, they've been doing the heavy lifting. A lot of Black women have founded companies or accelerated their companies over the past year, and have, actually put money in the pockets of other Black communities, musicians, singer-songwriters. But the people who actually have a lot of the money and a lot of the power, they've done a few things. But I think in comparison, for example, the PRS Power Up program, that's huge. Things that the MOBA Awards have done, Kanye King with Help Musicians. These are programs that, they don't have as much money as, some of the corporate institutions and the major labels and stuff. But I've been seeing, on a grassroots level, that they've been doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And I think for me, in terms of just what I've seen, like, have Black women of my complexion been exalted? And again, it is still that one person at a time, and again, we're not going to name any names, but I can see it happening. They're going to elevate one person, and then that same person's going to have, a great 2-3 years.
That's it. Yeah.
Another 2-3 years time until another, Black woman gets her moment to shine. So yeah, I think it is a little bit exhausting, and I think it's a bit upsetting to hear, especially from Michelle, that these are conversations that have been happening for decades. And I think for me, some of the things that stick out to me is that is this structure working? And for me, it isn't. So then I think to myself, then what's next? What's the alternative? And I think that's where a lot of my energy moving forward is going to go into, in terms of thinking about, Black women are sensational in terms of what we've created for ourselves, for over the past couple of centuries, despite, our position. So I do believe that we can reimagine an industry for ourselves that puts us at the center, but doesn't have to deal with, the lack of care and negligence that we've been experiencing now for decades, as well as the palatable perception of what Blackness is, which actually isn't real. Loretta mentioned that, Black women, especially for me, I've been raised by Black women. They're the most loving and caring women that you could ever kind of encounter. But these narratives and these myths and this like imaginary perception of who we are is just ridiculous, and it's damaging. It stops a lot of Black women from having the confidence to pursue a natural born gift, as well as shutting them out of the economy of music, and being able to, feed their families and things like that. So those are just a few of my thoughts on what happens next.
And amazing thoughts there. There's a lot there that we can all unpack there and think about. One thing that I want to pick up from what you've just mentioned, Estee, and was mentioned earlier in another part of this conversation, is the area of appearance. That's one disturbing finding that we found in the Black Lives in Music report. Nearly a third more Black women than Black men felt the need to change their appearance in order to be appreciated. So an anecdotal reference from the Blim report goes a bit like this. Black women can't make rock music, Sexual comments about the size of my lips, etc., are common. Racial comments about my crazy, unruly afro. I don't give these comments my energy anymore, but feel it's important people are aware. Having some experience working in the classical profession myself, this certainly resonates with me. But just coming back to you, Kimmer, I wondered what your thoughts about this. Clearly, that feeling of need suggests some pretty active levels of bias, both conscious and unconscious in the industry today.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely a factor, to the extent actually that with my career, because it's so prevalent, I've tried to kind of do as much as I can outside of the traditional music industry. And what I deem to be the traditional music industry is the labels, the kind of the press, the radio stations, etc., who a lot of the time want to push that kind of Eurocentric forms of beauty. And I find that I have a lot of Black musician friends who are also women who have had just the craziest comments and the worst experiences within the traditional music industry of how they should change the way they look, how they should bleach their skin, how they can't do certain genres of music because they won't be successful in those genres, to the point that they've advised me, and because there's been such a surge in independent artists, to actually operate outside of the traditional music industry and go direct to the fans, who may have less of a bias, and who may kind of not really adopt those stereotypes that the music industry can adopt a lot of the time. And I think we can see those examples with artists like Lizzo, for example. She wouldn't fit into what, you know, the traditional music industry might want to promote, but she's been able to be hugely successful with a fan base. And that is the case with so many Black artists, Black female artists that are given a chance here in the UK as well. But for some reason, there still seems to be this assumption that we need to look a certain way, or we need to behave a certain way in order to get these opportunities and in order to be successful.
Yeah, I absolutely hear that. And Michelle, if I can bring you in at this point, because again, we've heard you know, some narrative about this already, but this really neatly brings me onto the subject of colorism. You know, the concept of lighter skin versus darker skin. I mean, this is a real issue right across the industry, whether you're an artist or actually even, I think, in terms of bias, in terms of industry professionals. I just wondered what your comments were on that. Shocking, isn't? Well, it's not shocking for us, is it? I mean, at the end of the day,
it's not shocking at all. It's exhausting.
Yeah,
and it's this idea that lighter is better, and somehow lighter is more intelligent or more. I think it was Kimmer that said palatable. It's ridiculous, and it needs to be thrown away. It just needs to be thrown away. And unfortunately, you know, even through music, it's perpetuated. You know, the light-skinned woman is celebrated. You know, the lighty. That's what's desirable. Yeah, I mean, I come from a family where there's mixed shades of black. And so we've always accepted that. And we've always known that in our culture, you can be extremely light, but still be black. And there's nothing wrong with that, or very dark and everything else in between. So it's so foreign to me, this idea that, you know, to have lighter shade skin somehow is more acceptable and somehow is more professional and more, you know, I don't know, more desirable. And I just think it's horrible, but it's also down to us to change that narrative, because we also buy into that a lot. And we need to change that narrative too and celebrate all shades. And yeah.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And obviously there's some pretty sinister historical tradition that underpins all of this notion of colorism as well, which for me is even more shocking to think that that continues through to this day, whether that's an aspect of conscious or unconscious bias. It's
and this is that thing as well. It's like, is it really unconscious? You know, I've struggled with this because I have a daughter who's extremely light-skinned, and have seen her get preferential treatment because of the shade of her skin, or because they think she's mixed race, and then see her parents go, oh my God, there's no white in there. Oh, well, we can't hang out with you anymore then. So it constantly surprises me. But it's also very difficult to navigate, to instill into your child that you are Black and you be proud of your Black roots.
100%.
You know, and wear that badge that, yeah, I might be light skinned, but I'm a Black woman. Yeah, I think some of it is definitely down to us as well, to instill that, and to instill, it doesn't matter if your friend is dark skinned or if that singer is dark skinned, they're still amazing, and we should still be championing that.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if I could jump in at that point.
Come in, Chelsea, please.
Yeah, just that thing about kind of like the proximity to whiteness. I mean, like, I actually had a family member of mine, a really close family member, like tell me after a gig once. I did a gig at the Royal Albert Hall. It was like a big band gig that was like part of the proms. And afterwards, his family member came up to me and they were just like, yeah, for these kinds of gigs, I don't think that you should wear your hair out in its natural state. I think you should probably tie it up or do something. And that family member is Black. I'm mixed race. I class myself as Black as well, but that family member is like fully Black. And like, it was really amazing. And it was kind of like, on reflection of that conversation, I was like, it's so amazing how insidious like white supremacy is, in the sense that it's like, it not only like hates on Black people, but it also can be successful in getting Black people to sort of hate themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
And obviously it's like that family member is obviously just expressing trauma that another family member has put on them. Like, this was an elder of mine, and obviously an elder of theirs had done that to them, being kind of like, oh, you can't wear your hair like this, or you can't be like that, because, you know, it's seen as kind of, you know, like ghetto or hood or something like that. And that person then unfortunately has passed that to me now. Sure. And it's like, even though now I wear my hair however I want to, wherever I go, but I still have this thing in my head of like, knowing that when I'm walking out on stage, I know, and I'm very aware that my hair is different to a lot of the people's on stage. Like, even working in a kind of like predominantly white space, which a lot of the time I am, especially if I'm in the big band world, most of the time it's me, maybe one or two other people that are not white in big bands. And I'm so aware of like how I'm perceived as a result of that. And I don't think that awareness is unjust, because I do have like audience members coming up to me afterwards and commenting on my hair instead of my playing, or like being kind of, oh, your hair is so cool, like, how did you get your hair like that? Or like, oh, my hair used to be like that. Oh, then obviously it didn't, like, because you're not Black. But just like there's just so many little microaggressions that just kind of seep into your head as an artist. And it's like no matter how much you kind of like push against that, it's so hard for it to not be in your subconscious. Yeah, thanks
for that, Chelsea. And I you know, gosh, anyone wants to talk to me about what I look like after I've just given a concert, it's just, I don't know where they were for that last 2 hours. And I equally just want to put out there, you know, this whole idea of skin lightening product that is on the market as well. I'm completely shocked that is still even commercially viable. I'm amazed that people really want to go out and use these products. Loretta, I just wanted to bring you in here. There's one anecdotal reference in the Blim report as follows. We can never seem to get through the door, and we are often overlooked at every turn. And if you have kids, it's even worse. I want to say that I'm shocked that the industry does not better recognize parental duties. But of course, for those women with young children, it sounds really difficult to negotiate progress in the industry? You know, any young woman, but of course, more importantly, and pertinent to this discussion is young women or women of color in the industry.
Yeah, it's interesting because again, I think it comes down to that perception of women, like of Black women. I think if you speak to any woman who's in the music industry, you know, there's the whole idea of having a child and it being career suicide. But to be honest, that's outside of the music industry, isn't it? For some women, you know, that's the end of their career a lot of the time. But I mean, I've got countless friends, musicians, people I've interviewed who have literally gone on tour and hidden their pregnancy, you know, terrified that people are going to find out and then they're going to get booked for work. And then there's the pressure to go back before you're ready. I think where the added part for Black women comes in is, I can't remember who was talking about the stereotype, I think it was Estee, but just, you know, the type of Black women that we're allowed to be changes for the circumstances. So when it comes to being women, mums, and certainly going back to work quickly, suddenly we need to be the strong Black women. And, you know, you're strong enough and, you know, you're all right with leaving your child and you're all right with doing as many hours as you like. And maybe you are, but it's the fact that we are just the same as white women. Some women want to stay at home and some women want to get back to work. Some can cope with that and some can't. And I just think when it came to me having my son even and taking a short break, I just felt a real pressure to just have everything together and to keep things moving so that I had work to go back to. Now, I know that a lot of my friends who are white, who are in the music industry, felt the same thing in terms of being women and being parents. But I did feel this expectation that I would be able to cope with that. And I do feel like wider than the parenthood issue, that there's an expectation that Black women are able to cope with stress better than other women. And in stressful situations, we can put that aside and we can put our game face on. The difficult thing is a lot of us really can, but it's the fact that we don't often have the space to not be like that. And again, a bit, you know, nodding to what Chelsea's just said, I wonder how much of that I've internalized, like how much am I seeing or how much am I thinking that's what's expected of me, and I have to, because there is also, you feel like you're representing your race wherever you go.
Sure.
Whatever you put yourself forward for, you don't want to drop the ball. You don't want to be the one that's, you know, failed or got a bad reputation or done something, because you do feel that you're more than representing yourself. You're representing any other Black woman that might come behind you. And it's just a shame because there's so many pressures that come with motherhood. I mean, it's definitely my hardest gig by far out of all the things I've done. But to add that extra guilt and pressure and worry, and to feel that you have to kind of keep that to yourself, and let other men and even other women think that you're coping fine even when you might not be, really takes its toll on your mental health.
Absolutely.
I completely agree, Loretta, and just following on from your point as well, I don't have kids, but just in relation to Black women being assumed to be strong and expected to be strong in all circumstances, I actually wrote a song about this called We Are Not Soldiers. I think it's actually really damaging of a stereotype, and I think the only thing that comes from the expectation society has on us to be strong is that we're given more to bear. We're left to kind of fix things. I've noticed that a lot of these organizations like Black Lives in Music are started by Black women. Black women are very often on the front lines and expected to fix a problem that we didn't create, but the solution is left to us. So I do think that's a really damaging narrative that I'm quite passionate about breaking down through my music and exploring and kind of getting rid of this notion that Black women can cope with stress more than other women, and therefore people will give more stress to us.
Yeah, Kimma, I totally agree. Yeah, Loretta, I don't have children either. And like, in all honesty, like, I don't think I want to have children. And I think that's mostly down to the fact that I don't know where children would fit in with my career. As a touring musician and as a touring woman, as it is, sometimes the things that you need to ask for, like, for instance, like, you know, can I please have a separate changing room to the rest of the boys in the band? And then on top of that, being Black and people already thinking that you're super dramatic and require too much, and like this, you know, the kind of like the diva sort of kind of persona. Like I could never imagine being a touring saxophone player, especially as an instrumentalist as well, with a child. I just don't know how I'd be perceived like that. And it's that, and it kind of ties into that thing of like that internalization. Like I've internalized that of kind of all these messages are telling me that if I have a child, then my career is probably going to fall apart because I don't know if I'm going to be able to tour if I have one. And it's like, and yeah, obviously that's a huge, like ridiculously huge life choice that I've made based on some things that don't need to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, completely. I so relate to that. When I got pregnant, I was told that I was committing career suicide, and that I can't have it all. I'd need to make a choice whether I want to be a mum or whether I want to be in the music industry. And it was like, I don't really think there's a choice to be made here. And the conscious choice for me was, I'm going to do it all, and I'm going to I actually took my child, poor thing, I kind of took her everywhere, and she was in the studio with me, came to meetings, all kinds of stuff, because for me, I guess I was just so, you know, the idea of having to give up what I love doing because I'm going to have a child, which is completely normal, it just felt like madness. So I was like, actually, no, I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to actually work with my child and bring my child with me. But it is that huge pressure of, well, now you have to make a choice. Do you want a career or do you want to be a mum? And that can really mess with your head as well. I think it's hard.
I definitely just want to just chime in and just say, like, I haven't had kids, not yet, but before I went into music kind of full time, I was a teacher. So I used to teach kids and a French teacher as well. So that was very, very interesting. But what I wanted to just say was that I think a lot of what we're speaking about in terms of our experiences is that it's like Black women exist in the imagination of whiteness. And what that does is it puts pressures that actually don't belong to us onto us. And I think we're in a really interesting time, even with this conversation, that we're starting to, you know, unpick and unpack kind of what belongs to you and what doesn't. And I feel like this is really freeing. And this is like a step forwards in terms of rewriting the narrative for us, not only in our personal lives, but in our professional lives. And yeah, I just thought I should express that.
Thanks, Estee. I think that's it's really, for me, I just find you know, some of the things I've heard on this call just now really quite disturbing, that those are the kinds of life choices and the way that you know, people have to think in what is now the 21st century. I wanted to pick up on something that was mentioned early on. Kimmer, if I can come to you. One of the awful issues arising from the present situation of disparity is mental well-being. And of course, just what we've all been talking about just now in terms of these harrowing life choices that we have to either try and make, or we have to try and decide to just put to one side. According to the Blim report, 42% of Black female music creators said their mental well-being has worsened since starting their career in the music industry. I'm sure that comes as no surprise to anyone on this call. That compares with 22% of Black male music creators. We know that failure is a part of the music creator's experience, but for Black music creators, this is a disproportionate issue. We can't ignore the fact that this is a disproportionate issue amongst Black people in this industry, but more specifically Black women. Just in terms of funding applications, the Blim report cites 46% of Black women creators had one successful application compared to 74% white women creators who were successful. Kimmer, is there a way we can better safeguard against these issues, but also better support Black music creators?
Yeah, no, I definitely think that there's an issue there when it comes to mental health. And I think a lot of it is because the music industry is not too much of a structured industry. from coming into it myself, I would liken it to the Wild Wild West. And I think that because of that, it means that there's a lot of comments, there's a lot of racism that can just go unchecked. And like I've said, with my circle of Black musician friends who are also women, and the comments that they've received, the discouragement they've received from pursuing certain genres of music, having to change the way they look, and their livelihood is dependent on that. They're signed to labels with executives that require that of them, which is awful. And that really impacted their mental health, which, as a precaution for myself, I've tried to toe this line of being partially in the traditional music industry and partially out of it, so I can protect that mental space. Because I think we all come into, as Black women, we all come into this industry with very good intentions of just sharing the art that we love. And then we're hit with all of these stereotypes and these comments of, you can't do this, you have to do this, you have to look like that, no, we can't put you forward for that opportunity. And that can be really, really detrimental. And things like that, I think in perhaps more regulated industries, again, making the comparison with law, there are bodies and organizations that check things like that, and that would discipline anyone making kind of racist remarks or any kind of bias within that industry. And I think something like that could be replicated quite successfully in the music industry, just in order to protect Black women's mental health. And I actually think when it comes to Black women in music in the UK, I actually think we might have been doing better in the late 90s, early 2000s, when I was really little, because you had the Beverly Knights, as I guess, especially when it comes to skin color as well. You had the Beverly Knights, you had Mystique. In America, there was Whitney Houston, there was Missy Elliott. There was a lot of representation. I almost feel like it's lessened. I can think of a couple of successful dark-skinned musicians, and they're not even that mainstream. They're not that successful. So I do think there really needs to be a hard push, and I do think there needs to be industry bodies that are there to kind of discipline any untoward or bias that's in the industry.
Yeah, Kim, again, I totally agree. I mean, like, sorry, Roger.
No, please go ahead. It's
like,
interesting.
I'm kind of like thinking about it in terms of like my own industry as well, like in the jazz industry. There's kind of like obviously been discussions that have been happening, especially over this past year, around racism and around misogynoir and those kinds of things. And I think like a lot of Black women especially are so scared to call these things out, because if you call these things out, then people don't want to work with you anymore. It makes you a difficult person to work with, and a difficult musician, and a controversial musician to have on a bandstand. So like we're all kind of like having these conversations like within our own circles and within ourselves, and with kind of like, and with like non-Black people that we trust. But in terms of, there's just so many gatekeepers within this industry who have so many issues with their own kind of like racial prejudices. And that's what's difficult, is because they are gatekeepers. And it's like, on the one hand, it's like we should all be able to call these things out all the time. But on the other hand, you're scared of like of losing your career or not progressing in your career. So like to have kind of a body that kind of oversees these things in a really fair way would be so good. Like especially, I mean, in, like you said, like the music industry is like the Wild West, and like the jazz industry is absolutely like that as well. And it would just be so great to be able to like have an organization to go to kind of get support with that. Because like social media, calling it out on social media and stuff is just not working. It's not working.
There's not even any, like, there's no HR teams for an artist that's signed. Something that you'd have in a company. We just don't have access. We don't have those structures and those resources in the music industry. So yeah, I agree.
I would just add to that, the classical industry is a whole nother ball game as well on top of that. But Estee, if I could just turn to you. I was on a Tunecore panel discussion recently with the rapper Ray. Very notably, she became the first Black woman and first rapper to win the Glastonbury Emerging Talent Competition. She now has a global presence. I think Ray has blazed a trail and inspired Black women and rappers alike to show what can be done working independently. It seems to me emerging artists need more opportunities like this. I just wonder if you can just share some comments on that, if you wouldn't mind. We're just coming to the last few minutes of the call, so if you might be able to keep it brief, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, sure. So I love Ray. I think what she's doing is phenomenal. And I think I tuned into one of your conversations with her, which was great. And I think that is it. You know, you've got to reimagine what your pathway looks like, because there are obvious blocks. There are people who actually don't want you in the room, and they just want one of you, or they want you to be a certain complexion or weigh a certain weight, etc. And it's just exhausting. I think we come in a variety of shades and we have so much to offer and give. And it is a hard industry, but I think it's easier to be yourself. So I really, applaud, all the women on this panel, and especially, people who are choosing to carve out their own careers for themselves, because I think the alternative is to lose yourself, and is to lose what makes you special and makes you important, and what truly makes you powerful. So I'm all for like carving out your own pathway. And just yesterday, was it yesterday or was it Tuesday? No, it was Tuesday. Kanye King won the Strat Awards.
Yes.
And she is just a living example of a woman who has blazed her own trail, who has created something for herself. Her vision has brought us all in. And has established so much for us in this country. And I think that's how you do it.
Thanks, Estee. Very, very sage words there. We're really just getting into the last few minutes. So I would like, in an absolute soundbite from each of you, if you had 2 sentences, basically, what do you say to the young Black women coming through? What are you saying to the industry in terms of the urgent change that we need? What would you say? Can I start with Michelle? Well, Michelle looks like she's thinking, so I'm gonna leave her for a second. I'm gonna go to Chelsea because she looks pretty tooled up here. Chelsea, have we lost you?
I suppose kind of
two sentences.
Oh, am I back?
You're here. We've got you.
Hello. Am I back in the room? Okay, great. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I'll try and keep it quick just before my internet goes again. Yeah, I suppose kind of like...
Let's come back to Chelsea.
The thing that I've really learned is to make sure that you just have... Okay.
No, Chelsea, you're on. We've got you. Thank you.
Oh, I'm on. Okay.
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah, I think just as a Black woman is to make sure that you own your stuff, own your assets, own everything that you put out as a creator, because people can't take that away from you.
I hear that,
and I think that's kind of that's where the power is.
In the property. I hear that, Chelsea. Estee, just a couple of sentences from you.
Yeah, sure. I would say to any young Black, actually it's not just young, any Black woman in the
music,
to really invest in yourself in terms of your education and your professional development, however that, shapes up. It's really important to, refresh your tools and things like that, but also to define success for yourself and truly think about, what your ideal world looks like and just go for it. And in terms of what I'd say to the industry is you have to do better. Thank
you, Estee. Kimmer, just a quick comment from you.
For Black women in the industry, I would say to approach it like a business almost, that you are an entrepreneur as a musician or as a music artist, and almost be delusional in your self-confidence, because you will get comments that will throw you. You will get people try and project things onto you, and you need to have the self-confidence to truly be true to yourself and what you stand for.
Thank you, Kimmer. Loretta, last couple of words.
I think to any Black women, I would just say to surround yourself with people who know who you are and believe in your talent, to make sure that you're listening to the opinions of people who actually matter.
Thank you.
A lot of people who have things to say to you, actually what they have got to say doesn't matter. And to the industry, I would just say we're not going to see lasting change until we see ourselves represented on every level. So that's from the board up. We don't want to be turning up to shoots anymore where all the makeup artists, all the stylists are white. That needs to change. But also when we go into the boardrooms, we need to see people who look like ourselves on every level before we see real and lasting change.
Thanks, Loretta. Michelle, very quickly.
I would say don't turn your light down, turn it up. As Loretta said, surround yourself with the community that's going to support you and really bring out the best in you. And if you're not invited to the table, build your own.
Michelle, thank you so much. Those last words bring to an end today's discussion. It was really interesting to hear the views of all of our guests. There's been an overwhelming message from today's session. There's clearly a lack of effective support and a real need for a strong strategy from within the sector to accelerate change. Change is long overdue. We must level the playing field and value everyone in our community and eject discrimination. It's been an honor and a privilege to be on the call with our guests today. My thanks to Michelle, Chelsea, Kimmer, Estee, and Loretta. My thanks also to Sound City, Guest House, and of course Tunecore. I hope you've all enjoyed the discussion and found it interesting. Please join me again for another of our digital sessions in association with Tunecore. Thank you very much.